Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 151, recording on Wednesday afternoon, March 18th, back in the Minnesota-Minneapolis home studios. Glad to be back, even though there is 20 inches of snow on the ground, or at least that was supposed to be the case, and I couldn't delineate to you guys between 10 inches and 20 inches. But we're going to take some questions today. We'll get into that over the back half of this podcast. Took a bunch of you guys' thoughts, comments, conversations on Twitter. And it was everything from Kyler Murray fit to draft positional priorities to free agent conversation and who might be still possible over the next week and a half or what have you. So we'll get into all of that from your questions in the back half of the show, as I said. If you're new here and you don't know about this, so I'm Alec Lewis. I cover the Vikings for The Athletic every single day. We started a podcast about a year and a half ago to document this team via the video and audio form. So if you're watching on YouTube, first of all, appreciate you being here. You can hit the subscribe button. It helps us out. And then if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, you can rate and review and follow us over there, and we appreciate that stuff as well. But it's been a way for me to speak directly to you guys on all of the subjects, topics that you care about, hopefully providing some insight, some intel via conversations with folks in the league, in the building, numbers, players, etc. I got try to give you as much as I possibly can. That's going to not get me in trouble. So the show is presented by First Resource Bank. Hopefully you guys know that is a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area, run by really good people. Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, Charlie Anderson. They're Vikings fans. They care about the community. They're asking about this team on a weekly basis. So please go check out First Resource Bank, and their information is in the description. Show is also sponsored by Unreal, the clothing brand locally owned and operated that I wear every single day. All right, let's get right into it. We'll talk about Kyler Murray and the signing. I did not do an emergency podcast. You guys might wonder why. Why? I mean, what are you thinking? This is huge news. They signed a quarterback, and you're nowhere to be found. Well, I was in Nashville for the SEC basketball tournament. I go every year with my dad. It's been a yearly tradition that I never take for granted. So believe I might have been at the arena when the news broke and did a dead sprint to the Renaissance Hotel and made it for the press conference. So Kyler Murray, it seemed likely in the lead up to it happening, just from all conversations, all parties involved. I will say, coming out of the combine and spending the week in Indianapolis, it was a lot of Geno Smith and a lot of Kyler Murray, but you also heard the other names. I've said on the podcast and in writing, part of the reason there were as many names thrown out as there were was for this team to prevent something poor from happening, where if Geno Smith were to be acquired and Kyler Murray were to be kept for some reason, then the Vikings would have had to pivot, but they did not have to, because Kyler Murray was released by the Arizona Cardinals, which allowed him to visit Minnesota. And after a day of meetings and even like a one-on-one film session with Kevin O'Connell and Kyler Murray, they ended up making that happen. Why? You guys are probably asking why Kyler Murray, and I'll answer a bunch of different questions on JJ McCarthy, on Kyler Murray, on the fit. We'll get into all this right here, right now. The Vikings love the raw talent with Kyler Murray. I mean, the arm is undeniable on film, and I've had some people on social media be like, what do you mean the arm? I mean, JJ McCarthy throws the ball really, really hard. And yes, part of having a great arm and playing the quarterback position is being able to throw it hard. But there are other components to it, including being able to get the ball up and down, up and over into windows. Kevin O'Connell will often call those voids and vacancies, but oftentimes the quarterback has to get the ball kind of like a golfer has to get it up and over a bunker onto the green. The quarterback has to get the ball up and over a first-level defender and in front of a second-level defender, and that requires a level of touch, that requires a level of feel, that requires a level of anticipation. All of that stuff Kyler Murray has displayed on film. The athleticism, I mean, that is, if there's anything widely known about Kyler Murray, It is that he is just such a dynamic and explosive playmaker, and that stuff was evident to the Vikings as well. I believe he's the only athlete ever to be drafted in the top 10 in baseball and football. You don't do that without being a super athlete. And I think included in that, there's also like a cognitive part of that. It's not just physical traits, it is pocket presence, pocket awareness, ability to feel things, ability to kind of see things. So those are all strengths that the Vikings noticed with Kyler Murray as they have faced him in the past and as they dug into it. The over the middle throwing stuff is obviously a talking point, and it should be. And it's going to be something that I'm keying on in the spring and the summer and the fall as we watch some of these practices. How much are they targeting the middle of the field? How much, if he's struggling in those areas, is it a byproduct of height, or is it a byproduct of just, not seeing things clearly? There are a lot of defenders in one area. I think that's also oftentimes when you think of or when you hear about a quarterback struggling to throw the football over the middle, it's just assumed that the reason for that is because they're small. Whereas in reality, there are 6'5", 6'6" guys who can obviously see over offensive linemen who struggle to throw the football over the middle. Why? Because so much of it is a vision, perception speed, like you're searching through a lot of objects, like all of those qualities and characteristics oftentimes are irregardless of height. Like it is a, I mean, you could use the word vision, but it's kind of like a processing speed type of characteristic that allows some guys to be better at that than others. I will say this: Sam Darnold, prior to his arrival in Minnesota in 2024, there wasn't a ton of, belief that his strongest suit was throwing the football over the middle of the field. Like, the arm talent was undeniable, but he too often seemed to be sped up or to struggle to see on passes over the middle. And so much of what the Vikings were able to do with Sam Darnold was that they structured things from a timing perspective on each given pass play to where he trusted the offense and the system so much that he was often letting the ball rip without perfect vision at times. So I that was one area. And then over the course of that season, you got to a place at which, man, Sam Darnold really throws these dagger in breaking cuts really, really well. So much of that was just the timing as much as anything else. So can the Vikings get Kyler to play with a similar level of anticipatory ability, trust in throwing the football over the middle of the field? Like, that's a question that you guys, I'm sure, have, that I will be fascinated to watch kind of over the course of his time here. The fit with Kevin O'Connell beyond just the middle of the field stuff has been a talking point. And it's one that is completely understandable. You have an offense that has been, as I heard Greg Cosell, who's analyzed these things for a long time, the way he described it, I thought was really astute, where he's like, you have this really well choreographed offense that gets guys open, in rhythm, on time, and with a specific intent for each individual play. And then you have a quarterback who is kind of, to keep with the movie parlance, like the ad-libber in terms of how he acts maybe a little bit off script. And so marrying those two worlds is part of, again, the day-to-day evaluation that I expect to do, whether it is at OTAs or whether it is in the summer or in training camp. One of the areas that's pretty clear in terms of how the adaptability is going to need to work is Kyler Murray's played a lot out of the shotgun. Believe his highest under center rate for his career in a season was 27% in 2024. The Vikings traditionally are playing an under center almost 50% of snaps. So there is a chasm there that is going to have to be filled one way or another. It's probably going to be a combination of both. Either the Vikings are going to have to introduce a little more shotgun to their systems and to their operation, which is going to, in tandem, call for them to marry up more of their run game to more of a shotgun style run game, which they've been at the lowest rate of the NFL in terms of shotgun runs over the last 4 seasons. So, like, it's probably going to take a little bit of adaptability from that standpoint. On Kyler's end, his ability to play even more under center will probably take a little bit of adaptability kind of on his end. And I think there are reasons to believe that he can operate there. Again, 2024, the season where he played the most under center, he was as effective as he's ever been that season. He threw for 3,800 yards. He ran for 500 yards. That was Drew Petzing in that offense. And so, that's part of why at The Athletic earlier this week, Ted Wynn, who is one of the premier film evaluators in the public sector, doing this thing, like, Ted and I worked together in this story about the fit, and Ted said to me pretty clearly, he's like, I think this is a pretty good fit. And I asked him why, like, what were his reasons why? Well, the Vikings love to throw these corner routes toward the sideline, which often, what does that take? You guys might, what is a corner route? Well, it's like a little, you run vertically, you press out towards the sideline. And sometimes when cornerbacks are kind of sitting in that area, the quarterback has to get the ball up and down. Well, there are a lot of instances on film where Kyler Murray can do that. The other component of Kevin O'Connell's offense that is definitely a fit is the Vikings love running some of those bootleg, 3-level style concepts. And that's where with Kyler, you can get him out on the move. He can be a playmaker. He's kind of out in space, probably where he is incredibly comfortable from an improvisational ability. So like those are two areas I'd expect you'd see a lot of. And then, I mean, we'll see how the Vikings try to generate some underneath stuff if that's the route they want to do it. Maybe TJ Hockenson, really motivated in the final year of his new deal, is able to get back to kind of the underneath separator that he was when the Vikings acquired him in 2022. I mean, perhaps, whether it's Aaron Jones out of the backfield, whether the Vikings draft a running back and they're thriving out of the backfield, perhaps that's a way. I mean, there's I think the summary with the fit that I would say is it's going to take a little of adaptability on both sides. I do think both sides are really motivated to make it work. I think both sides are aware and sharp enough to adapt. So for those, when you take all of that into account, I think there's definitely reasons to be optimistic. I also think skepticism is warranted too. Like if you are on one side or the other, whether you're really an optimist that Kyler Murray is going to come in and lead this team to a deep playoff run, I mean that's probably, I mean you're on the bold optimistic side of the spectrum, and if you're skeptical that the fit really makes sense, I think that's sensible as well. And it's going to be incumbent upon both sides to kind of prove it and show it on a daily basis over the course of this season. I do think like what is critical to know or for me to talk about is like the health is going to be so important. Kyler Murray has only played in 17 games once in the last 5 years. And believe he's played 11 games in one season. He played 14 games in one season. 1 year ended with the ACL. Last year was a foot injury. So like, as I think about the realm of possibilities, an injury is one that you have to talk about, you have to think about. And so that gets to probably a question of quarterback insurance beyond JJ McCarthy that I'll get to later in the podcast. But one of the components of Kyler being a Minnesota Viking, one of the ones that's going to be important to talk about is the health and the longevity, because as Kevin O'Connell said at the NFL scouting combine, when they've had a quarterback stay healthy for 17 games, they've won a hell of a lot of games, regular season games over 2 of the last 4 years. So the last thing there that I do, before I get to the JJ McCarthy of it all, like I do want to say, I've had a lot of people ask, like, if this is such a great fit, great situation, why didn't if Kyler Murray is so phenomenal, why didn't other teams want to acquire him? I think, or try to trade for him from Arizona? There are a lot of variables to that. One would be he had a $19.5 million guarantee in his previous contract that the acquiring team probably was going to have to pick up. he also had probably some leverage of, if let's just say a random team acquired him, he's made a lot of money. Does he really, he can afford to probably sit and identify the spot that makes the best sense for him, or introduce some leverage into the equation. And I'd also say, like, there haven't been a ton of teams that are in this mid-tier quarterback market. I would say, like, Indianapolis was pretty set on Daniel Jones. The Steelers have been pretty clear with Aaron Rodgers, which obviously hasn't happened yet. The Jets were in the market, but they've loaded up in draft capital to draft a guy in 2027. Miami, it always felt like Malik Willis was probably going to land with the two former Packers decision makers down there. Arizona obviously was ready to move on from Kyler Murray and kind of establish a clean slate even after Mike LaFleur got there. So I think all of that plays a role in how this ended up happening. And when you just get down to the brass tacks of it, I mean, the Vikings got an incredibly dynamic, talented player for a minimum $1.3 million contract at the game's most important position. So that's why it's been celebrated, because it just doesn't happen. And that is a testament to, I mean, how Kevin O'Connell is viewed within the league, which I've talked about for now a month and a half, of like, this quarterback opportunity was still really thought of highly. You're obviously throwing to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. You have a defense and coordinated by Brian Flores. So all of that, I kind of wanted to get out there and say. I know it was many ways, a lot of different subjects, but felt important to hit all of them. As far as the JD McCarthy part, I mean, the Vikings, yes, they've talked about this like it's going to be a competition. I understand it. There's nothing kind of like, I'll never forget when I covered Major League Baseball. During spring training, the manager would always get like, "Are you ready to name your opening day starter?" And it'd be like late February, and the manager, whether it was Ned Yost or Mike Matheny or random assortment of managers, they're always like, I get why you're asking that question, because you got to ask something today, but like, why do I have to do that right now? And there's a lot of time and evaluation, and who knows, if I name an opening day starter now, what is the health going to look like? What is the fit? Like, there's a lot of boxes to check to where you're not pushed to do something until you're really pushed to do it. And I think that's part of this. I also think there's a motivating component of it all. You want for JJ McCarthy to have that carrot out there as a possibility. For Kyler Murray, you want you want him to be maximizing himself at the most optimal level every single day. And so while you talk to people in the league and they're like, it is a little silly. There's a guy who's played 7 years and thrown for 3,500 yards 4 times. Like, a guy who's, as dynamic as he is, who chose the Vikings over other opportunities. You're not doing that if you're not the starting quarterback. I would say it would take something beyond drastic for JJ to come out and win the job, which isn't a referendum at all about JJ or where he is. He's shown the high end flashes. I've said that many times. It's just going to be about the consistency, and it's going to be really interesting to see what he looks like fundamentally. From a lower half perspective, from a touch perspective, when he gets back to Minnesota, all that stuff's going to be interesting. But there's no question it's an uphill battle when it's a guy like Kyler Murray who has accomplished what he's accomplished. And some people will be like, well, what has he really accomplished? I mean, again, the guy's thrown for a ton of yards. He's had a lot of production. He's been to the Pro Bowl twice. I think Arizona in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, began the season 8-0. And obviously, yes, they fell apart after that. But like, the guy has produced in the NFL. And that's the other thing. And I tweeted this. I'm like, this isn't, if Kyler Murray plays really, really well, it will obviously be a testament to the surroundings and the coaching and the motivating factors and all of that. But it's not like some complete revival of a bust. I mean, this guy has been really productive at times. Two other moves before I get to the questions that I'll talk about. The Vikings on Tuesday night signed Bills tackle Ryan Van DeMark, who was a restricted free agent, to an offer sheet. I didn't know much about Ryan Van DeMark, not going to lie about that, but watched the tape of him on Tuesday night. He's massive. Like, that was the first thing that stood out. Like, this guy has arms and legs, and he's huge. It just really big, really athletic. He definitely, when he engages with a pass rusher, he definitely has power. And his feet are definitely quick, specifically moving forward. Like, he was pretty good in the run blocking phase of the game that I watched. You do kind of worry about him in space. Like, if he's just isolated one-on-one with a pass rusher like an Alex Highsmith of the Steelers, which I watched, like, it becomes it's a tough task, it's a challenge, and it's not often the most pretty. But I mean, if it was, he would be a starting tackle in the NFL. There's a dearth of those guys. So there's a reason he's obviously been a backup. But I'd say he's very different in Justin School in that if he has to fill in, you have conviction that you can definitely still run the ball behind him. And I don't believe you'd have to give him chip help on the edge on every single passing snap. Like, it's probably more of a 25 to 50% equation, which isn't nothing. So it'll be interesting to see if the Bills match that offer sheet and what that looks like. They have some depth at tackle, so we shall see. And then on Tuesday night, the Vikings also agreed to term with Johnny Hekker, the punter, who is an exceptional holder, which is huge for Will Reichard. Johnny Hekker was a teammate of special teams coordinator Matt Daniels, with the St. Louis Rams. He's a 4-time first team All-Pro. He definitely, the production last year was interesting to look at. I mean, there were 37 qualified punters on the stats that I looked at True Media. Out of 37, he was 22nd in yards per punt, 31st in punts inside the 20, 24th in punts inside the 10, and 31st in punts inside the 5. So is he very clearly at this point, production wise, has he been in the top half of the league? No. Does he have the kind of, the cachet? Yes. Is he a good fit personality wise from a holder perspective? Absolutely. So that's what I've got for you on Johnny Hekker. The draft we're about a month out from the draft. It's going to be fascinating. I will say this: I have a mock draft, my second one. We usually do 3 or 4. That is scheduled for Thursday morning. So maybe by the time you're listening to this, it's up. Where I made 2 big trades, huge swing at the top. I'm not going to spoil that one. Excuse me, spoil that one. But yeah, please check that out at The Athletic Mock Draft 2.0. Yeah, all right. It's time for the question portion of the equation. We're going to take a quick break, talk a little bit about Unreal, and we'll get back to the questions. All right, we're going to talk about Unreal. They sponsor the podcast, clothing brand based out of St. Paul, Minnesota. That is exceptional. They've got team-specific drops. I think they're doing a Minnesota Timberwolves in arena Prince hoodie drop. That is, Prince color. How cool could that be? I can't even imagine. I'm going to have to beg somebody over there for one of those hoodies. But they've had a couple Minnesota Wild hoodie drops of late. And the day-to-day stuff. And I've got, over in my apartment, I've got some polos that I got getting ready for golf season, obviously. And they sent a couple of those. So great attire. Their link is in the description, but it's great stuff. In SEC, in Nashville at the SEC tournament, people were asking me about it, and I saw some people there repping. So it was good to see it down south. By the way, very excited for the NCAA tournament. I'm a 1 bracket guy. I picked Arizona to win it all. And I'm fascinated to see how it goes. I will be Thursday evening rooting. You're going to see some Texas A&M tweets on the timeline probably, because their coach, Bucky McMillan, was the coach at my high school in Birmingham, Alabama when I was in high school. And he's had a meteoric rise, and it's pretty special. And he's a hell of a coach. So to this day, still one of the best coaches I've ever been around. And they play St. Mary's in the first round. So either if you see crazy tweets on the timeline at Alec_Lewis on Thursday, or you see nothing and I'm shattered internally because they lost, you'll know why. Anyway, all right, it's question time. Question time portion of the podcast. We need a sponsor. Question time presented by. So if you got a company you want to sponsor, you just send me an email, aleclewis54@gmail.com. But we would absolutely sponsor that one. Comes from Miles Gorham. How do you see the defensive line room rounding out with the departures of Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave and no new additions in parentheses yet? So the Javon Hargrave release was not surprising at all. I think I had probably before the season ended even had kind of insinuated that that was going to happen. The Jonathan Allen one was much less obvious, but it also made sense in a couple of facets. One, the Vikings released him as a post-June cut, which really means like they can spread out the money and it resets the deck a little bit. Let's say if throughout this season at deadline or whatever, or even not at the deadline, but after June, the Vikings want to make a move via trade. They'll have the cap space to bring somebody on. So that made sense. And then the other component of Jonathan Allen, it just, I don't know if the fit with this specific defense really on both, like, I don't know if it ever really got to the perfect place that they wanted it to or had the vision for it to. Um, so that's what I'd say. I understand the question. I think Jalen Redmond's role is pretty cemented as just a down to down, 3 down starter, kind of like at the defensive end spot, not the edge rusher position, but more the defensive end spot. I think Levi Drake Rodriguez definitely showed flashes in 2025, and the door is probably going to be open for him to establish even more playing time. You definitely internally, I say you internally, the Vikings are definitely hoping that Tyrion Ingram Dawkins and Elijah Williams, two young players that they invested in last draft cycle, that those guys under the tutelage of Marcus Dixon last year and now Ryan Nielsen, that they take a step forward. And it would be nice to hit on one of those guys as a somewhat integral contributor. So the development there is going to be one, just like Ty Felton. Like I think that's going to be something this spring and summer that I'm definitely watching, probably specifically with Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. I definitely could see a draftable player here. It's just more a question of how high and who fits. Like at number 18, there have been mock picks of a Caleb Banks who suffered another injury. I also like there's risk with him and a lot of facets from a health and there's just a lot there's risk there with Caleb Banks. Peter Woods, I'm a fan. This guy's a defensive, if you don't know, he's a defensive tackle, played at Clemson, was one of the highly rated prospects entering 2025, then didn't have his most productive season. He's more of like the defensive end probably type. I like the tape. I think it's pretty interesting, but I think the lack of production would definitely scare me personally. And then Lee Hunter is a way more big body type than the Vikings have added in the last year. I would say Lee Hunter does have some wiggle to him. So if Brian Flores liked him and viewed him as potential like the more nose tackle type anchor and you could get him in the second round, like that would not be one I would dismiss. There's other guys in this draft, like Grayson Halton's a guy I've seen mocked, the Oklahoma defensive tackle. He would make a lot of sense, but again, probably more in like the defensive end mode. As far as free agency, like I definitely thought David Onyemata was a possibility. The former Falcons defensive tackle who played with Ryan Nielsen. He ended up getting paid close to $10 million, I think, from the New York Jets. So that number might have just gotten to a place at which the Vikings, which haven't wanted to go crazy with this market, they might have just not been willing to go there. So we'll see if there's another possibility in that type of ilk. But the draft is not something I would rule out. Absolutely not. Next question comes from JJ. I don't think it's McCarthy. Do you think there are position or let's see? What do you think are the biggest positions of need for the Vikings in the draft, and what round would you prioritize each position? The positions that come to mind. I mean, defensive tackle we just talked about. I think there's reason to wonder about that. Center for sure. The way I viewed the center, how things have gone there. Um, I don't believe the Vikings love some of the back end free agent centers enough to pay them substantially more than what they've committed to Blake Brandel, and that those guys could be significantly better than a Blake Brandel with more time at center. So that's why I don't think they've spent on that spot. They like guys in the draft. There's a lot of them. I mean, there's a clump of day two, early day three guys of Sam Heck from Kansas State, of Logan Jones from Iowa, of Jake Slaughter from Florida, Trey Zune, Texas A&M. Like there is a clump of center draftable prospects that it's kind of a pick your flavor, different body types, different sizes, different skill sets that this Vikings, I expect them to be sorting through. So the center spot in the draft, maybe safety though. I mean, probably safety, but I don't know how high up. Like that's you've seen every mock draft seemingly from some of the national draft experts who I respect the hell out of the work they do and the time they put in. Like it's Dylan Thieneman everywhere, and I like the Dylan Thieneman tape. Guy played at Purdue, transferred to Oregon, has played in the deep half, has played as like a Tampa 2 pull runner type of guy, is quick to react. Definitely tested really well at the combine, and is supposed to be like just a hard nosed guy, loves ball. So like if that were to happen at 18, it wouldn't be the biggest thing, wouldn't be the craziest thing ever. I'm just not sure if like last year in the first round, you could say the Vikings had a need at center. They passed on Malachi Starks and Nicky Eman. I mildly like both of those guys. Eman I did not foresee the breakout that he had. So yeah, safety we'll see. Um, like where they might do that. Jay Ward is entering the last year of his rookie deal, and they're high on Jay Ward and what he can do in 2026. But we'll see. Wide receiver wouldn't surprise me. Running back wouldn't surprise me. Tackle depth potentially. Tight end late potentially. So there's a lot of ways. Edge rusher maybe depending on, I mean, the Grenard thing. If you were to trade Grenard, I mean that would definitely be feel edge depth would feel pretty important. So that's what comes to mind there. Do you have any names or positions for us to keep an eye on for potential free agents coming up now that the first wave of free agency is done? I just mentioned receiver. I mean, I've wondered about receiver 3. Obviously, in the best case scenario, Ty Felton assumes that spot. I mean, a guy like Jawan Jennings would be awesome. Like, I do think the Vikings really like Jawan Jennings, but he's wants a lot of money. He's represented by Drew Rosenhaus. And he probably is deserving of a lot of money. So if the Vikings weren't willing to pay Naylor, how far would they be willing to go on a Jawan Jennings? I'm not sure. Like this will get aggregated. I'm sure. I'm not. I don't think I'd expect the Jennings thing to happen, but like if that type of player could be acquired for a cost that is sensible, that's some of where my mind would go. Next question: how much confidence do the Vikings have in Ty Felton being the number 3? Do you think the Vikings draft a receiver on day 2 or 3? Mark Larson. I think there's hope with Ty Felton for sure. He's going to have to prove it this spring and summer. With him, he is an athletic dude, run after catch guy. Really wants it. They've really liked him internally, and Keenan McCardell has obviously taken a liking to him going back to the draft. I will never push back on teams taking more receivers day 2 or day 3 like every year because you can find them, and this team has done a good job of drafting and developing them. So wouldn't rule that out. I also think like if you're sitting there at 82 or 83 picking, and you need a center or receiver. Like I'm probably going center. That's just me, but that's what I'd say. Next question: Purple Nurple, have you gotten any inklings from the building how they see this draft class? I mean, I think this Viking staff sees this draft as a critical chance to add youth to a team that needs it. Every draft typically has a narrative of either, this is the most talent ever or this talent's lacking. But like in every draft, typically in the first and second round, you're trying to find high impact starters. And then from rounds 3 to 5, you're taking pretty good flyers on guys you hope can develop into starters. And then in round 6 and 7, you're throwing absolute darts that are like penny stocks, and that's just kind of how a lot of these drafts go. I don't think like there is the most high end talent at the top besides 5 to 10 guys, but after that, you can definitely find starters. And this Vikings team, as you guys know, and as I've said, probably to the point at which I lose my voice, like they need to find starters who are young via the draft. It's just that clear. Next question comes from Roy McAvoy, which is a probably not their real name. What did let's see. He's asking, what did I mean when I wrote that JJ McCarthy faced a challenge posed by some of the more elemental aspects of being the face of a franchise. These growth hurdles have become widely known among NFL executives and coaches. I think someone asked this the last episode. I probably said a similar thing. Like the quarterback position requires a level of consistency on and off the field in every possible way. And so the Vikings, part of it has just been not getting the level of consistency that you would hope. Like I've written this too, that the Vikings, it's been hard for them to know on a week in, week out basis and every Sunday what they're going to get. The reason I wrote that people around the league know it is because they do, and because it would affect like value and perception of value and all of that stuff. I'm sure that's going to get aggregated, and people will think probably that it's me railing on JJ McCarthy again. Like that, I think that's the perception, when that's not it at all. I've just tried to be very clear and objective about it and honest to the reporting, because I just feel like that's the job. And I've also said many times that none of these components, on the field, footwork, the facing a tough time, mastering the elemental aspects of being the face of a franchise at quarterback, like none of those are deal breakers or definitive statements to what JJ McCarthy can ultimately accomplish as a quarterback in the National Football League. So that's just what I'd say on that. It's important to me that I just do it right. Javon Stewart, what's one thing fans believe about the Vikings right now that just isn't true based on your reporting? This is good. I would say that my answer would be that what is one thing fans believe that just isn't true based on your reporting? Well, all fans is painting with too broad of a brush, but I'd say there is a healthy amount of fans that think that every bad decision that the Vikings have made over the last 4 years is Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's fault, and that every good decision was a byproduct of Kwesi's lack of involvement. Like I think somehow over the course of the last 4 years, that became a lot of the narrative of every draft pick gone wrong is because of Kwesi. Every signing gone wrong was because of Kwesi. Now I've said this and I get this, that when you are the general manager of a franchise, the accountability falls on your desk. But I have also said that in many instances over the last couple of years, there has been a major influence on decision from a lot of different parties, specifically the coaching staff. And so I just think in this era of, this is a broader conversation, but in this era of how media is consumed or how fans consume, like there is always this attempt at having a simple, clear, one person, one thing to blame. And the truth and the reality of it is typically a conglomeration of a ton of different variables and a ton of nuance and a ton of complexities that, like, if you really want to know why this or why that or how this, like, there is a lot of voices at play, influence at play, all of that. So Yeah, I mean that's just I do find it funny sometimes when it's like, these players are released and cleaning up Kwesi's mess. It's like, hold on, like there was a lot of influence from a lot of different places. So it's a great question, Javon. It's not one I've thought a ton about. Kay Delisle, the always trusted listener, asks, what is the temperature of the Jonathan Grenard trade talks? I think like over the course of the last week or last 2 weeks, it probably 2 weeks ago, probably seemed more imminent than it was. I would say that the Vikings had been very clear from the outset that they are doing this on their terms. So they are not going to trade a talented player that they've really liked having, Jonathan Grenard, unless it makes a lot of sense for them to do that. I would say the Philadelphia Eagles definitely still need edge rusher talent. I mean, they have guys, Jalix Hunt, they signed Arnold Ebiketie, they have Nolan Smith, but to have another elite edge rusher, I mean, it's part of the reason they were in on Jalen Phillips. And then I think the Colts are kind of in a similar vein. Like Trey Hendrickson goes to Baltimore. Where are they? So we'll see with it. Again, just I don't expect the Vikings to do anything that's not done on their terms. Last question, is JJ McCarthy a good enough backup for this team, or do you think the Vikings dip back into the quarterback market for a more experienced veteran? Question comes from Mac. I do think JJ McCarthy is definitely a good enough backup. I will say this: 2 out of the last 3 years for the Vikings have proven that sometimes you need the third quarterback to be serviceable. So I mean, I'm not going to be surprised at all if the Vikings do dip their toe back into the veteran quarterback market, and that's not like some people will view that as, oh, JJ's relegated to quarterback 3. It's just, frankly, to use the line that they've used many times going back to the end of the season, like wanting to build the best, deepest, most talented quarterback room, that would be a move that can make that happen. And Kyler Murray, with the risk of injury, let's say he gets hurt, Jaden McCarthy, he plays, there's risk of injury there. You could find a world in which you do need another quarterback. And so, like, it would be sensible, in my opinion. I think it would be smart and prudent for them to take that approach of trying to find another experienced veteran to the room. So, yeah, question wise, that's going to do it. And that's going to do it for episode 151 of the Alec Lewis Show. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I think we'll be back later this week with a little guest talking Kyler Murray and the fit of someone who has a great perspective on it and will have a good perspective. So stay tuned for that. Like I said, mock draft Thursday at The Athletic. Had the fit story with Ted Wynn over at The Athletic earlier this week. Shows presented by First Resource Bank. It's sponsored by Unreal, the clothing brand. It can be found at all of your places you get your favorite podcast. And enjoy the NCAA tournament. It's going to be a blast. It always is. And we will talk to you very, very soon.